Pennsylvania Reserves, 30th Pennsylvania Infantry Regiment. We're here at Cedar Creek Battlefield today, and we got a private here doing some maintenance on his rifle. He's filing the bayonet because the bayonet doesn't quite fit snugly around the muzzle of his rifle. So he has to file some of the metal away inside.
And could you give me your name and what you'll be doing through this, please?
Me?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Small, and I'm also at the 30th PA, and I'll be helping with the cooking and washing dishes and that kind of thing. Eventually, once we get the fire started.
Crickenberger, Lieutenant Colonel, 20th Maine, Vincent's Brigade.
Big Ray Vernon from Flemington, New Jersey. I'm with the 15th New Jersey Company 8, and it started.
Sergeant with the 20th Maine.
My name's George Raw. I'm a private, and we're with Smith's Brigade in 1st Delaware, Company D.
My name is Jeff Liner, and I'm also a private in the 1st Delaware, Company D.
And how long have you been doing reenacting?
I've been doing it just over a year.
Uh-huh.
This is actually my first event last year, so this is my anniversary, I guess.
Okay, great. How about you?
This is my 3rd year, and this is also my anniversary reenactment.
All right. And where are all of you from?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
In the Lebanon area, most of us. Some of us are from Easton.
Yes, Easton, Pennsylvania.
My name is Ron Palesi. I'm Major 2nd Battalion, Vincent's Brigade. We're here with 6 companies of infantry, part of Vincent's Brigade.
Prepare to fire.
Fire!
Fans are out.
1, prepare and fire.
Number 2, prepare and fire. Fire.
Not advanced, primer has failed. Crap.
Years of working on this, I think you can call me Tom now. They wrote home from these camps about October 18th. It was a beautiful day such as we're seeing today. The colors on the leaves and on the mountains were spectacular, and all of the men who wrote letters on that day mentioned the fine Shenandoah Valley weather. The camps here, the federal camps around Belle Grove, is represented by the tents that we see to our left as we face the field, spread all across these fields. They spread across the fields on the other side of Route 11. Acres and acres and acres of white tents. 3 corps of the Army of the Shenandoah, the Army of West Virginia, which was really just a corps, the 19th Corps, which was behind gigantic entrenchments along Cedar Creek facing up the valley, and in front of us and back over the fields for more acres, the camps of the 6th Corps. 32,000 men in camp, having finished, they thought, a hard campaign. They defeated the Confederate Army of Jubal Early at Winchester in September. They had chased him to Fisher's Hill and defeated and routed him again, and now they thought they were through in the valley. Their commander, Phil Sheridan, in fact went to Washington to negotiate the terms of returning to Richmond, Petersburg, and helping in the siege in what people were beginning to think would be the final throes of the war. But there was much more to come. And the hinge of history creaked here in the early morning of October 19th. For this reason, there was an election going on in the North, and Abraham Lincoln, among many others, was convinced he would never be reelected, that the Union would be sundered by none other than George McClellan, the former commander of the Army of the Potomac, a hero to the troops, a disaster to the politicians, who was campaigning on a platform of peace at any price, a negotiated peace with the Confederacy, which meant victory for the Confederacy. It would mean their perpetual existence as a separate country. It would mean the end of everything Abraham Lincoln had struggled for to keep the Union together. This outcome was not only possible, but likely, as the summer gave way to the fall of 1864. Jubal Early made it worse by almost burning the U.S. Capitol in July. He was in Silver Spring, Maryland, burned the house of the U.S. Postmaster General, put a bullet into a man standing next to President Lincoln. Then he burned Chambersburg, having defeated a federal army in Maryland. The war had been going on for 4 years, and the northern politicians and newspapers were saying, enough. We understand that a little better after Vietnam. They were saying enough. President Lincoln was in despair. They couldn't seem to make any progress. His new general, Grant, has so far succeeded only in killing people at a higher rate. The armies seemed bogged down. The war seemed not to be going anywhere. And that's why the spark that occurred at Cedar Creek had such potential. First of all, when Jubal Early attacked and routed the Federal Army, when Jubal Early routed the Federal Army and stood with an open road back into the North again, the damage that he was in position to do was absolutely incalculable. And likewise, when Phil Sheridan regrouped his forces and closed that door and provided material for a rather bad poem, an even worse song, and all kinds of dramatic and favorable press coverage, what had been a terrible setback was turned into just the kind of electrifying victory that the Lincoln government needed so badly. So as I say, the hinge of history creaked here at Cedar Creek. And that's the background for the reenactment you're going to see today. The tents to your left represent the sleeping federal camps. The white markers on the ridge to your right represent the cemetery, which in reality is just west of Middletown, where some of the heaviest fighting of the day occurred. And the ridge that cemetery is on today represents the ridge a mile the other side of Middletown, where General Sheridan found his army already reassembling, but in a very bad mood, toward midday on October 19th. The units are almost all in place, and so we await the opening guns of the Battle of Cedar Creek 135 years later. The musket fire you heard represents the first contact of the skirmishers, which occurred haphazardly along the line as three divisions of Jubal Early's army came in from an improbable direction, actually from behind us as we're standing here looking at the battlefield. Keeping in mind that the federal defenses were all aimed up the valley to our left, you see the problem. The first skirmishers made contact, the first panicky shots were fired in the pre-dawn darkness with thick fog cloaking the river bottoms and the entire battlefield. A great deal of alarm. What is going on? There were rumors that a probe had been sent out and that everything was normal. But this federal army had no idea that Jubal Early's army was anywhere in the valley. They thought they had left, that the campaign was over. And to hear that musketry spread along the line and grow in volume until they knew there was a major engagement was on was startling in the extreme to this sleeping federal army. Can you imagine how it was coming out of your tent in the dark and the fog and hearing that musketry and trying to figure out what does it mean? What direction it's coming from? What's going on? Now see, it's not skirmishers, because skirmishers would have fired and retreated by now. It's not casual, because it keeps on going. So what is it? Such maneuvers as we're seeing now of preparation to withstand an attack were the luxury that the 6th Corps over to our front right had. But the Army of West Virginia and the 19th Corps had no such time. One of the Confederate attackers said later they jumped up running from their tents. Here they come now, out of their camps. They're not defeated, they haven't been fought yet. They're looking for a way to organize. And in the fog and in the smoke and in the confusion with the advancing Confederate line of battle, they can't find their commanders. These guys have, they're forming up. Some men never saw their unit during the whole course of the battle. On this very ground in front of us, several units reported that just as they were getting a formation like that together, they were driven away by a charge of beef cattle. The federal beef herd was quartered on these grounds and ran in a great stampede away from the guns and kept breaking up the formations of the men trying to resist the onslaught. Colonel Rutherford Hayes rode onto the battlefield somewhere in the area just to our left here. His horse stumbled and he fell to the ground with bullets hitting the grass all around him and with a Confederate line of battle calling on him to stand up and surrender. He thought he was a goner, but to his surprise he was able to run away and become President of the United States. There comes the Confederate battle flag through the U.S. camps. You might think of people running in panic in such a situation. One of the 19th Corps soldiers said it was more like an angry, sullen retreat than a rout. These men were angry. They hadn't had a chance to fight. They hadn't had a chance to get organized. They didn't feel somehow that it was fair, but they couldn't stop retreating. Look at the size of that Confederate battle line. Go ahead. The bugle call that you're hearing repeated is forward, forward.
Say again, this is Tom.
Go ahead. Roger, thank you. You're seeing some half-dressed Union troops in that retreat for the simple reason that they were routed out of their tents so fast they didn't have time to grab their coats. There were even more graphic states of undress reported, but reenacting has its limits. And now the 6th Corps is beginning to find its feet. Colonel Getty's 2nd Division of the 6th is beginning to find a way to stay organized. The Confederate advance is slowing down. General Sheridan is on the field. General Sheridan is on the field. Listen to him yell. I was wrong. That wasn't General Sheridan, just somebody very popular among his men. The 2nd Division of the 6th is falling back to a 2nd position closer to the cemetery. And there will be the rock of the Federal Army on this day as General Getty refuses to go another inch in retreat. General Sheridan is now on the field. Look for the swallowtail flag. That is General Sheridan rallying his troops. approximately 6,000 men fighting on this field right now to get a sense of the reality of Cedar Creek. Multiply by 8. Federal Command, where are we in this scenario? When General Emory reported to Phil Sheridan, he said, "The Army is together, General. We can make a safe retreat to Winchester." General Sheridan said, "Retreat, hell, we're making coffee out of Cedar Creek tonight." And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he gave the order, and that massive blue line formed 3 miles long in a great curving scythe, and the Federal Army headed back towards Cedar Creek, and here they come. Go ahead. And now it's the Confederates' turn to angrily, slowly at first, give ground trying to find a place to get reorganized and fight again. And so the door that had been opened to the Confederacy at noon on October 19th, 1864, was swung firmly shut by General Sheridan. Stephen Dodson Ramsey, youngest general in the Confederate Army and a rising star, was dying on the field. Charles Russell Lowell of the Lowells of Massachusetts, a man who could have been president one day, was dying on the field. 10,000 casualties here at Cedar Creek. And now the men are taking a moment to honor them. I don't know about you, but I've never seen such a spectacular reenactment in my life. Would you let them know you appreciate it? It was the last great battle of the war in the Shenandoah Valley. The action moved to Richmond. The 6th Corps that fought here, that was the rock of the Federal Army here, was the 1st Corps through the Confederate defenses at Petersburg and began the final collapse of the Confederate Army. Phil Sheridan, of course, was in on the final trapping of Lee's army at Appomattox. And Cedar Creek, both in its aftermath and in the events of the day, cast a great shadow over the history of this country. It is our hope that on seeing this today on the actual ground where it happened, that you'll leave here with a greater appreciation of what did happen here and what it meant for all of us. And thanks to these men who've come here and paid for the privilege of being in this reenactment to show it to us. Thanks to the Cedar Creek Battlefield Foundation for setting aside the land for this purpose. Thanks to Suzanne Lewis, who arranged for the 150 cords of firewood and the 10,000 gallons of drinking water and the 600 or 800 pounds of ice that had to be brought in here today. The logistics of this entire operation rested on the shoulders of just a handful of people, most of them volunteers. And by all accounts, they've done a magnificent job, and we should let them know we appreciate it. Do you mind?